and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Tonight, Senate adopts conference committee report setting new sequence of the 2019 general elections amid vehement opposition from some lawmakers. Senate issues 1-week ultimatum to federal ministries, departments and agencies to submit details of their 2018 budget proposals or face sanctions. London Appeal Court rules that 2 Nigerian communities cannot pursue Royal Dutch Shell in English courts over oil spills in the Niger Delta. And South African President Jacob Zuma defies ruling party, refuses to step down.
And on business news tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria unveils plan to use information technology for proper inputs distribution to farmers under its Anchor Borrowers program.
And then sports news, Dutch football's second division side Fortuna Sittard replaced Sunday Olise as head coach with Claudio Braga.
And from Abuja, a federal high court fixes March 15 this year as date for arraignment of chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, Danladi Umar, over alleged corrupt charges.
We begin tonight from Abuja, specifically the National Assembly, where senators appear to be sharply divided over the amendment of the 2010 Electoral Act, which sets the sequence for general elections in the country. 10 senators today staged a walkout during plenary to address journalists. They maintain that the amendment, which seeks to schedule the elections, is a predetermined plan from a political party threatened by the incumbency of President Buhari. Our correspondent Linda Akigbe reports.
From the moment the National Assembly announced its intention to set the sequence of general elections in the country, eyebrows have been raised. The other areas up for amendment in the 2010 Electoral Act have not elicited this level of debate, as focus is firmly on the amendments of Section 25, which proposes that the National Assembly election be held first and the presidential election last. This is against an earlier election schedule released by electoral body INEC, which slated the presidential and National Assembly elections on the first day of the election.
The political party whose candidate died may...
As the debate on the proposed schedule rages on, the chairman of the Senate Committee on INEC presents a conference report detailing the decision of both chambers on the agreements reached for amendment in the Electoral Act.
The conference committee hereby recommends as follows: that the Senate House of Representatives do consider and approve the Conference Committee report on a bill for an act to amend the Electoral Act No. 6, 2010 and Electoral Amendment Act 2015 to provide for a timeline for submission of list of candidates, sequence of election and political party primaries.
Immediately after the report was adopted, lawmakers raised point of orders.
Mr. President, this report of sequence of election was never discussed in the Senate here. It was never discussed in the Senate. So why are we bringing it up here?
Distinguished colleagues, in my comment, I said, this institution, we must protect it. I know that every politics is local. I know. I appreciate that. But as much as it is local, we also have to maintain the integrity of this institution.
But the lawmakers who oppose the amendment are determined to have their say.
There's a report that was circulated. The chairman and the co-chair did not sign it. Why do you want to make a law to address just one particular problem at a particular time?
Targeted.
This is a very partisan report.
I can tell you here today that we have 59 senators who are opposed to the inclusion of this Section 25 to the Electoral Act. 59 senators. You can take that to the bank.
The chairman of the Senate Committee on INEC also makes some clarifications.
First and foremost, let me make this very clear that I had signed my signature on the concurrence committee report. So I don't know where that came from, but I really signed it. And number two, I am not aware if the sequence of election is being targeted at anybody. I'm not aware.
Going forward, the conference report will also have to be sent to the House of Representatives for adoption. If passed, the bill will be sent to President Buhari for assent. President Buhari can choose to assent or withhold assent to the bill. However, the National Assembly can veto the president and pass the amendments. The critical issue will be if lawmakers on each side of the divide have the required numbers in both chambers to either veto President Buhari or defeat the veto. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
We're going to switch gears now and move on to this breaking story coming into us that the South African President Jacob Zuma has resigned. Again, just to say that Jacob Zuma, the South African president, has resigned is just coming into us, and we believe before the end of the bulletin we'll filter in more coming in from South Africa. Now, right here, while lawmakers sort out the polls date, the Independent National Electoral Commission says it will continue to register voters for the 2019 general elections until December 2018. Now, that's 60 days before the election as stipulated by law. Following complaints from Lagos State and other parts of the country over the exercise, the electoral umpire has added 30 more direct data capture machines in Lagos, bringing the number in the state to over 50. At a press conference today in Lagos, the INEC Resident Electoral Commissioner, Mr. Sam Olumekun, says the Commission is doing its best to ensure that Nigerians get registered.
Thank you, sir. 30 new machines have been deployed in Lagos State. And let me assure you that within the last 2 days, when these new machines arrived, we have been capturing averagely of about 2,500 people every day. The primary aim of the CVR program is to register eligible Nigerians who just attained the voting age of 18 years, or Nigerians who have never registered, Nigerians who need to transfer their voters' registration from other states of Nigeria to Lagos State, or Nigerians who desire to transfer within the local government areas of Lagos State. Other Nigerians who can enjoy this window of opportunity include those who have lost their cards, those who have damaged their cards, or they have changed their names or have one issue or the other dealing with the PVC. But in response to citizens' demands to have centers closer to their domains, the Commission in the state embarked on a rotational plan for some of the centers within wards, within registration areas, in each of the local government areas, and as of today, we have increased registration centers to 55.
And now to look at the implication of both chambers of the National Assembly adopting the amendment of the Electoral Act, setting the sequence for the general elections. I'm being joined from Abuja by a lawyer and political analyst, Mr. Daniel Bwala. Thanks a lot for joining us on the news at 10.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, you saw the split there. I mean, in the controversy that this is causing, with even some lawmakers walking out as well. What the feel is that we get, some people say that this is all politics. Is it just the general business of lawmaking, or is this what you expect from them at this time?
Well, obviously, there is political motivation. In fact, in my opinion, I think that the National Assembly have applied the doctrine of self-preservation. At this time when there is distrust between the executive and the National Assembly, they in their wisdom think that the only thing they can do is to see that they secure their return in 2019. But the cardinal question for us in the legal community is to look at the legality or otherwise of the laws that the National Assembly sought to and they amended. Now, if you look at Section 25(1) of the Electoral Act, to which the INEC, enjoys the power to fix, not just fix a date for election, but the sequence. If you compare that with Section 78 and Section 251 of the Constitution, I do not think there is a contradiction or conflict between the powers of the INEC to fix a date for election and the powers of the National Assembly to amend the Electoral Act to change the sequence. For example, a lot of people have said that the Act of the National Assembly runs contrary to the provision of the Constitution. But if you look at Section 78 and 121 or 22, 31 or 32, it is clear that the Constitution empowers INEC to fix a date for the conduct of both National Assembly election and the presidential election. But what the National Assembly have done is they have passed a law amending Section 25 of the Electoral Act to change the sequence and not the date. But it remains to be seen. I think that this is a situation where they will have to approach the Supreme Court so that Supreme Court will give a decision as regards whose right it is to be able to fix not just the date but the sequence of the election.
Yes, because that was going to be my next question to you, whether there is a legal logjam as we can see it in terms of what the implication of what the lawmakers are proposing in terms of their rules to amend laws against INEC's rule, which has the backing of the Constitution. So are you saying that it's the Supreme Court that should give us the interpretation we need?
Well, based on the doctrine of separation of power, the way the democracy is structured, that the executive will execute the laws enacted by the National Assembly. But where there is a conflict as to whether the law is right, is proper, is for good governance, or whether the execution of the law or execution of any of the extant laws by the executive is consistent, it is usually the judiciary that will interpret the provisions of the Constitution. For one, I think that there is no conflict between Section 25 sub 1 and Section 78 and 131 of the Constitution. That is Section 21 of the Electoral Act. So it remains to be seen how the Supreme Court, you see, somebody will have to approach the Supreme Court. On the part of the executive, the Attorney General can approach the Supreme Court or the National Assembly themselves. And the reason why approaching the court is necessary is that there is not likely to be any possibility of the executive, the president, accenting to this law passed by the National Assembly. The whole idea is that everybody is running for his own dear life. That's what it means.
When you speak of people running for their own dear lives, what about the voters in all this? This is something that many political analysts are also looking at. Where does this leave the voter? Is it all about securing the seat that they have? And what does that say about our politics, even at this stage now?
If you ask me for my personal opinion as a private citizen, I think that if you look at the balance of convenience, the sequence, the amendment of the Electoral Act by the National Assembly now is going to give more favor. It's going to be more favorable to the masses. It's going to be more favorable to the new political parties that are set up. It's going to be more favorable for people who want to vie for political posts in 2019 to be able to test themselves and see popular participation. Because the presidential, if you put it as the last, it means there's going to be a wider participation by the generality of the people. But for the National Assembly, I said they did that because they want to be sure that the executive support them in 2019. If it doesn't do that, and they in turn will not be able to do that. So in my opinion, on the balance of convenience, what the National Assembly have done is in favor of democracy as against the interest of just one arm of the government.
Really interesting that you say it's in favor of democracy. What operates in other climes, and why is it that we always feel the need to tinker with the Electoral Act, often on the heels of election season? As you're suggesting, could that be good for democracy? Is that how it happens everywhere else in the world?
Right. The world over, democracy is flexible. The law evolves, the people evolve. And anything that happens, you pass the law to make sure you correct that. I think that the step by the National Assembly is, in their view, an attempt to correct. For example, to be honest with you, it is not just this element that is in the amendments that they have passed. A lot of other positives are there. And so if, for example, the president rejected this proposition, then that means that you are throwing the baby with the bathwater. There are lots of other problems that they have addressed in the recent amendment. But as to whether the amendment of the Constitution is consistent with what is happening the world over, I think everywhere in the world, every now and then they tinker with their electoral laws, they tinker with their, in fact, they tinker with their constitution to be, to make sure that it is with the cutting edge of the society. If you look at America, you see First Amendment, Second Amendment, up to 28 amendments. Because as the people evolve, so also the law.
All right, lawyer and political analyst Mr. Daniel Bwala, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts with us on the news at 10 tonight. And in part 2, after the break, military command battling Boko Haram insurgents in the northeast insists funds earmarked for operations are grossly inadequate. That's in a moment. Please join us again.